Hello and welcome. Well, if I was to say to you, if you were to do one thing today, it's to take some time out for yourself. What's the first thing that comes into your mind? With being a busy mum or dad, you may see this as being impossible, now, especially now throughout the COVID-19 era and all the stresses and all the life challenges that are part of just living through this pandemic. And let's face it, life is always busy with so much to do. I have another question for you. Did you know that Beyond Blue has stated that 1 in 6 women suffer depression and 1 in 3 women experience anxiety? Also, that women suffer higher rates of PTSD and eating disorders than men. That said, in this interview today, we are going to tackle these issues and talk about the reasons why looking after yourself is so important for our mental health with our special guest, Deb Harman. Now, Deb is going to discuss why all parents and caregivers need to make it a priority to look after yourself, especially now and throughout this COVID-19 era. Now, a little bit about our guest. Now, Deb is a certified life coach, a master NLP practitioner, a hypnotherapist, and certified relationship workshop facilitator. Deb's got a lot going on, and this is awesome. Now, she's also a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 6. And over the last 10 years, Deb has studied human behavior and simply why we do what we do. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deb. How are you?
Well, thanks, Rachel, and thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, it's great to be with you, and I feel honoured that you've invited me to join you today.
Just wonderful. And once again, really grateful for your time. Now, to begin with, we've all heard the analogy many times in our life that we can't pour from an empty cup. And this saying, above all else, really is true. If we don't have enough energy for ourselves, how is it possible that we have enough energy to give to others? And that being our children, our partner, our family, and friends. Initially, I just want to know, what are your thoughts on this concept?
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree with it. I mean, my other favourite one is the oxygen mask in the aeroplane.
Yes.
Where the parents have to put theirs on first before they can take care of their children.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely agree 100%. So important.
And in addition to this, I guess, it's not only about the amount of energy that we have, but it's also about the quality. We're just generally happier and nicer people just to be around, and life is generally better and just a tad easier, I guess it's fair to say. And maybe this is one of life's little secrets. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we feel nourished ourselves, we give off a better energy.
Yes,
So,
100%.
that's just so important for the people around us, and especially, when we are feeling stressed. Yeah, it's super important to make sure you keep filling your own cup.
Yes. In particular, I know you work with women to empower them to live their life in accordance with who they truly are and to live life on their terms and to love what they do every day. That sounds awesome. I would love to know, have you seen, well, how have you seen, COVID impact the lives of women and in particular mothers in recent months?
Yeah, well, I think when it really hit home, I was actually doing what was it, a FaceTime with my daughter. And, we live 2,000 miles apart, so COVID or not, I'm not there every day. And I could sort of see how stressed she was and how she seemed to have lost her confidence.
But I guess this problem isn't necessarily isolated to just women. It's parents and caregivers overall. But for the moment, we're, I guess, addressing more women, women and parents in general are doing an amazing job of juggling family
That's
work, relationships, jobs, and all the obligations that accompany the roles, of being a parent, running a household, keeping a job down. And I guess COVID really has put an increasing amount of pressure on parents while juggling all these different roles. But women in
well,
particular often forget to take care of themselves, don't they? Because being consumed with all the needs of others, which leaves their little time for their own needs. I'd love to know from your perspective, why is it so important for mums to put themselves first?
okay. So I just want to go back a set to what you were just
Yeah.
saying about you know, we're putting the children first. And in my experience, that's sort of going back to our upbringing. And, you know, when your parents, your mother, your grandmother, your great grandmother, they parented differently to us. And that's how we learn to parent. So when we get stressed, our subconscious goes back to the way they parent. Now,
Mm.
you might be a little different, a bit generation, but my mother and my grandmother were stay-at-home parents, and their role was basically to cook, clean, and bring up the children. So when we get stressed, our subconscious mind takes over. And then we go back to more along the lines of our upbringing than what we necessarily believe. So that's why we change our behaviors. Is that kind of making
I
sense?
completely understand. So this is a learned behavior, and we've learnt these behaviors as to basically, as you said, what our parents and our grandparents and what's been basically learnt down from generation to generation. That's
That's right.
how and why we do
So
what we do. Is that right?
that's exactly right. So while we know that we should be taking care of ourselves, and probably up to January this year we were,
Mm.
now with all the stresses that have come into play, we've sort of forgotten about ourselves a bit,
Yes,
and
understandable.
just, yeah, and just forgotten to bring ourselves to the forefront of caring for ourselves.
Well, that being said, why do you find that stressful times like we're living through at the moment are even more or are more important than ever, really, to place a high importance on health and well-being? So, I mean, overall, and generally, I guess people find it more difficult, I think, to be able to look after themselves and put an importance on self-care and those types of things during times of high
Yeah,
stress also. What are your thoughts?
yeah. Well, I think it's well documented that stress leads to a lot of health issues anyway, and we're
Yes.
sort of taught to pull away from the stress. So I think now more than ever, it's really, really important to find strategies to make that time for yourself. And it really is about strategizing and even planning your day and working out where you fit into your day and what your priorities for you are.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, that's for men and women as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a family, it needs to be a shared thing where both parents give each other time out so that, yeah, they've got what they need.
And would you say thinking like this is not being selfish, rather being selfless? And I guess the more we have for ourselves, talking about energy, the more that we do have to give to others, as we were just saying before.
Yeah, that's right. It's certainly not a selfish act. It's
Yeah,
yeah, I think it encompasses caring for the family as a unit as a whole.
yeah. Overall, just getting back to mental health for a moment, what are the
Mhm.
implications for our mental health if we don't take time out for ourselves?
If we don't look after ourselves in the first instance, then my concern is we are going to sort of start going on that downward spiral
Mm-hmm.
into mental health issues. And this is, you know, obviously the isolation, the lack of connectedness at the moment that we have.
Yes.
And that's so important that we really need to try and find a way to remain connected as society is just generally being pulled apart, if you like,
Yes.
because it's that connectedness that really supports our mental health.
I wanted to address something that you mentioned before also, about the majority of our behaviours are learned early in life by the adults really that nurtured us. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess I wanted to explore this concept a little bit more if I could. And look, I really believe it is confronting to realise that the bulk of what we do, say, think, feel really is as a result of what we learned from our parents in our childhood. And this can pass down behavioral traits from generation to generation. Of course, this can be a good experience and also can be bad. But, we've
Mm-hmm.
all heard the saying a million times, you're just like your father or you're just like your mother, and those types of things as well. So, I guess if someone is wanting to break a pattern and they do not want to pass down, let's say, in particular, a negative behavioral pattern to their children,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
opinion, how can they start to make that change?
Okay, so the first thing is, right, because when we have these negative patterns, we tend to try to deny them.
Of course.
So the first thing is to accept them, accept that they're real,
Yep.
accept that it happened. And then once you've accepted it, maybe you need to forgive for it, depending on what it was. And then when you've gone through that sort of process, then you can begin to move on and move away from it
And
and, break free.
I think even just initially getting to the point when you realize that you have adapted a behavioral pattern that has been passed down, let's say from your grandmother to your mother and to yourself, and or maybe something that's been passed down, let's say from your grandfather to your father, and as a daughter that you've maybe adapted those sort of behavioral things, it can be really
Hmm.
confronting to even just come to that realization that you're doing things on instinct and acting and behaving in such a way that you don't necessarily have control of, that aren't necessarily maybe the best way to be able to treat others. But, getting to that point of realizing that you have these behavioral traits that you want to change for the sake of not passing them down, you want to break that cycle so that your children, and it's not going to be passed down for generations to come, is a really big realization and it is confronting. But, from that, have you worked with many people in that instance and helped try to have them break these cycles?
Yeah, I've worked with a few, more so when I was doing the hypnosis, which I've now moved away from.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these things are obviously buried down in your
Subconscious mind.
subconscious.
Yeah.
So that is a really good way to break these cycles and bring these up to the surface.
And would you say
Uh,
being in your subconscious mind, then they need to really change their underlying beliefs and decide what they actually believe, think and feel, instead of having um, those being defined by what their parents think and feel, would you say?
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Because a lot of us just say, "I'm not going to behave like that. I'm not going to do that." They never
Yes.
have a clear path of what they are going to do.
Yes. So it's about actually understanding what are your personal beliefs, as opposed to saying, well, I believe this because this is what my parents believe, or I believe this is because this is what I've always known. I don't know any different. It's about them sort of saying, well, what are my beliefs about this situation? And once they've defined what their personal beliefs are, that's where the change actually happens. And then they just need to maybe act on those behaviors, and sort of go about their business every day, but just knowing that they're making their own decisions as opposed to them being what they've always done. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because once you've got it clear what you want, and then it is possible over time because your subconscious mind is trained through repetition.
Yes.
Now, there's a saying out there that it says it takes 21 days to change a habit. I don't know if you've heard that or not.
Yeah,
That,
absolutely.
that yeah. So that varies greatly. Some people can change like that. Others, it takes longer. It can take 3 months. But if you sort of continually practice what your beliefs are, then over time you can overcome it and you can set a new footprint, if you like, in your subconscious.
Nice. Well, I guess the question now is really, how is this relevant to parents, in particular, with regards to being locked in the COVID-19 sort of lockdown phase at the moment.
Yeah,
Great
work
idea.
as a team.
Yep,
Work as a team.
very much
You know,
so. Yeah.
it's not mum here and dad here. It's got to be teamwork. And then when you start to do that, you'll bring that sense of connection back that we've all kind of lost in a way at the moment.
And also getting back to what we were saying before about breaking patterns, would you say maybe it's one example may be that that you may think that taking care of yourself is selfish because that's what your mum thought,
Mm-hmm.
and or things that's been said around the household when you were growing up as a child, and the fact that now with COVID, you need to break that cycle and understand that taking care of yourself, as we said at the very start of the interview, it's not selfish, it's selfless, and that you actually need to break that cycle. So this would be a perfect example of a behavioral pattern that you've seen as a child your whole life, that, you know, your parents think that by looking after themselves, it's actually a selfish act, but in fact, it's not. We actually do need, during this COVID-19 era, to be looking after ourselves and to making sure that our cup is full. So we are going to be able to be a better parent, better friend, better, you know, relative to anyone that we're in contact with. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, Put yourself first. I mean, you know, when you're planning your day, make your first thought yourself. You know, how am I going to get 10 minutes? Or if you know that you have a low point in a day, what am I going to do earlier in the day so I don't hit this low point?
Yeah. So
Is it finding 10 minutes? Is it food? Is it good nutrition? You know, find something that's gonna boost your whole physical self, basically.
And it's funny, I mean, self-care, a lot of the time we do think of, you know, normal sort of, it's a very cliche thing, isn't it, in the media, about looking after ourselves, and it's about a massage and a facial, all these things. But self-care isn't necessarily that. It may just be whatever gives you energy, as you just said, and finding that, and then finding the point in the day when you can ensure that you have, even if it's just that 10 minutes a day, if it means that maybe you just have your coffee by yourself in the morning or what have you. I mean, how else, from your perspective, do you think parents can take care of themselves, and what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, obviously the time out. Look, some of the other things, and I'm harping back now to when mine were younger, but I had 4 children, then I had a big gap of 14 years, and then I had another one. And my life was just full on because we had basketballs, we had soccer, and I had a baby, and, you know, trying to balance everything. And one of the things I always did, and this was just so simple thinking back on it, was I always carried a book in my bag. And if the youngest one ever fell asleep in the pram, I just headed straight to the closest coffee shop and bought a coffee and read my book.
and
Okay, so self-care is not about, as you said, your nails and your massage. It's just finding that 10 minutes.
and what is it
And
that, and knowing what it is, it actually sort of tops up your energy a little bit, I guess, as
that,
well.
that that's it. I mean, it's nice to have your nails done. I love having my nails done.
Now,
But that's not self-care to me.
yes, it's knowing what self-care is to you and is actually going to make a difference. Valid point, Deb, and I totally agree with you. And what is for one person is not going to be for another. But there's another thing you shared in your a great mindfulness tip that you shared in your article that I'd love to read out. So this is quoting
Yeah,
you. Um,
yeah,
this is your wording from the article. One of the easiest ways to plan your day is to set reminders on your phone of when you need to do something, and that way you can focus on what you're doing, um, and know and have a schedule for your day. So mindfulness,
yep,
that being, I guess, the act, or do you find, I guess, that act of mindfulness, that being focusing on the present and letting go of the past, not worrying about the future, but only focusing on the present moment, actually
yep.
helps reduce stress and anxiety. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, absolutely it does. I've actually got a thing where I keep my diary down the side of my computer now. And then I know exactly what time I'm doing what. So I know when I've got to speak to Rachel. I know when I've got to go to Pilates. I know what when I'm walking the dog. But if it's scheduled, then you know you've got time for anything. And I mean, parents, and especially those now with the children home for remote learning again, schedule a children's day.
Yes.
Okay, so between 9 and 10 o'clock you've got that schoolwork. Between 11 and 12 you play outside, but between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, depending on their ages, you've got quiet reading.
So the
And
so the key. The key is to scheduling. We each have the same amount of time in our day each day, just know at what
That's
point,
right.
and almost like a routine. So it doesn't matter if what state you're in, but either way, if you are in full lockdown or if you're sort of easing out of restrictions, let's say in another state, the better we
Yep.
have our day structured, I guess the better that we can actually ensure that we are making time. That way we have no excuses. We can always find the time to be able to have self-care. What are your thoughts?
That yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. And if, most children as well love routine. So if you've
Yes.
got that daily schedule, they know what's coming and they know when their quiet time is. And that's mum's quiet time. You can be in the same room together and have quiet time,
Yes. And we do
you know?
find in speaking to a lot of psychologists, they do say this helps reduce the children's anxiety also because they know how and what is planned at what time as well. So yeah,
And that's right. And it isn't just parents, it's children going through anxiety as well,
100%.
because
Yes.
they're bouncing off us. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Make a plan for your day, schedule it, and then everybody knows what everybody's doing. And don't switch on the commercial television.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you're going to have a movie, have a movie. Don't put commercial television on that's going to be interrupted with in news bulletins or whatever. I don't
Yep.
know. I haven't watched commercial television for probably 10 years, but
Well, Deb, we've spoken about some really fun stuff today, and important topics as well. If you were to summarize your key messages, what would they be?
Okay, so I think, as you said, it would come down to that: being mindful, scheduling, focus on you, work out what is self-care for you.
Yes.
Don't worry about what's self-care for your friend. Just focus on you, and just take some time to look inward and just breathe.
Yes. Absolutely. And I guess
Just
admitting
breathe.
that we need help is, I guess, far from admitting weakness also. But getting back to the point of mental health, which we addressed at the very start of this topic,
Yeah,
if anyone watching or listening needs support or would like someone to speak to, of course, there are a lot of support services available here in Australia. And in the
that's
show notes, we will provide numbers for Lifeline, for Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline, and Headspace. By all means, it's, as I said, admitting that you need help is far from weakness. So this is something that we each need to be very aware of, and these support service helplines are definitely there to be able to help and assist us. Because let's face it, living through a pandemic is not the easiest thing for anyone by any stretch of the imagination, and it's getting harder. I think it's actually getting harder as we go along. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you 100%. I mean, Melbourne's not the only place that's gone back into lockdown. There's a few others across the world.
Mm.
And I think this second wave I think it's bringing out a lot more stresses in people.
Yes.
And especially now that people are on the move as well.
Hmm.
I'm finding I live in a tourist town, and I'm finding there's a lot of angst against travellers.
Hmm.
Some people just don't want them, and yeah, you can see the stresses and the anger starting to build in people again, and we just need to avoid this, to just not do it. Just, I don't know, practice loving each other and caring.
Yes.
And
And like we said, if people do need support, would like someone to speak to, there are all those support services available, and we'll have those numbers in the
absolutely.
show notes. Deb, if people got any questions for you and or want to reach you after this interview today, whereabouts can they find you?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess probably the easiest way is my website. There's a contact form on the website which will come through via email.
Hmm.
So my website is just ultimatelifeshift.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deb. I've loved this
All right.
chat. You take care and stay safe. Take care.
Thanks, Rachel. You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.